Millennials are America's largest, most educated generation in American history. A generation of ambition, education, and progress facing an uncertain reality. Born into an era of economic chaos, they face challenges far beyond what they were told to prepare for. They've had to rethink traditional milestones as they enter adulthood during global uncertainty. Their struggles mirror those of a generation before them, Japan's lost generation. The same story, different country, different time. America's lost generation goes beyond the numbers to capture the unique ways this generation is reshaping their future, in their own words. It's a story of real people, authentic challenges, and untold resilience. Explore the stories and reflections of America's Lost Generation by Cameron Cohen. Available now at soupllc.com.
Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are joined by Michael Stockham. He is the author, I have it here, of the Jake Fox series, Ties That Bind. He's a best-selling author and litigation lawyer. He's a powerhouse in the legal world and a rising star in the literary realm. He's one of those fabulous litigation attorneys that has lots of experience, has now taken to writing about it. His first book was called Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer, and then he has the series Jake Fox, Ties That Bind. And we're going to get into his experience, why he started writing, and some interesting stories like how a convict might have changed his life and career, and go from there. So welcome, Michael, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a blessing to be here.
Yes, well, thank you so much. So why don't we begin from the very beginning? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your book?
Sure, absolutely. So I am what I consider to be an accidental lawyer. I originally started out, I have a bachelor's degree in writing poetry and a master's degree in writing short stories. And so I really started out wanting to be an author. Then later in life, pivoted to being a trial attorney. And I've been doing that work for almost 25 years now. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I started getting back into writing and working on novels, and have published 2 right now and am working on a third.
Very nice, very nice. Well, yes, the humanities to law pivot is a very common one. So I almost did that myself. I did the reverse order. I actually went to school with the intent of becoming a lawyer, and then got into writing and book publishing instead. So your method's much more profitable than mine was. But
You
that's
never
that. That's okay though. So I kind of so when what let's talk about this. What inspired you to get back into writing after doing all that undergrad and grad school work in it, and then going to law school? What triggered you to get back into writing?
There wasn't one specific trigger. It was sort of a nagging desire. So I had been writing all along, a little bit here, mornings and nights and otherwise, for most of my career. And then just later in life, somewhat of a trigger of COVID, perhaps, and being locked in and a little bit of insomnia and other stuff. Had a lot of hours on my hand. So I decided to go ahead and try to put them to productive use.
The infamous pandemic project. I like it.
Yes, yes.
So no, that's quite all right. Why did let's talk about the series first. Let's dive into
Okay.
that. Tell us a little about Jake Fox, Ties That Bind.
Okay, sure. So I wanted to pivot a little bit after the first novel. The first novel was inspired, not based on, but inspired by some true events. And then afterwards, I decided I wanted to take on a little bit different project, something that was truly just all fictional. And then I wanted to space it out or have a larger project. So I decided I'd write essentially 3 trilogies of 3 with the same characters, so that there would be multiple arcs, if you will. There would be a full arc over 9 books. There'd be 3 larger stories that arced over 3 books, and then each novel would stand on its own.
No, that's a lot of forward planning. That's quite impressive. I've had a couple authors on the show who just really just planned out all of these books like that, and I'm always impressed because I don't think that way at all. Like when I first went and pitched my fantasy series, I was pitching to agents, and it's like, well, we might be interested if it was a trilogy, and I'm kind of like, oh, okay. I'm like, I don't want to write 2 books about what I consider the boring parts of the story, but whatever. So I'm always impressed with people that like plan out so elaborately like that, because I don't at all. So it's good, but here's kind of self-publishing tip. That is the better way to get people involved in reading and develop an audience, is to have multiple books with the same character like that. One of the mistakes I made that a lot of people made is a lot of us wrote our first novels kind of as standalones, and then went and did a series or whatever have you. And so that's, yeah, the people that start from that way are smarter for sure. So good on you for figuring that out early on.
Well, I don't know that
Um,
it's smarter, but it's at least a process.
yeah, yeah. So give us the main thrust of the series. Who's our main character? Who do we believe in, and what do they do?
Absolutely. So Jake Fox is a former big time lawyer out of Dallas, Texas, that loses through family tragedy or otherwise, moves back to his hometown, a small town in North Texas, and gets involved in a series of different trials or efforts, if you will, thriller type plots.
Mm,
And then, so you can see that the 9 books would be over his whole journey back to the house, back to his hometown. And then each of the trilogies would be one big sort of episode in that journey. And then each book is sort of a smaller, if you will, screenplay or act within each one of those trilogies.
oh, okay. That's no, that's I mean that's perfect setup for a legal thriller though, right? So,
It gives a lot of freedom to be able to do it that way because you have the interaction with the town, the community, other aspects of it. So you can have a lot of fun with parts of the book. It doesn't have to just be set in a courtroom. There's
right.
a number of aspects of being a lawyer, from crisis management to how it impacts your personal life to what you do on a day-to-day basis to the drama of being in a courtroom. And so you get to play with all of that within sort of a page turner thriller type atmosphere.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent fun thing. Why did you pick Texas as the location?
Because that's where I live and work in Texas. So I'm based out of
Oh,
Dallas, Texas, at a large firm here called Holland and Knight. It's actually nationwide. It's about 2,200 lawyers. And so it just sort of seemed like a natural locale because you're very familiar with your current surroundings, um, but able to write and still sometimes write short stories in other places that I've been in life, whether it's New Mexico, Florida, the Cayman Islands, etc.
no, that's perfect. That's fun. Let's go back then and talk about Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer. You said it was loosely based on some untrue events. Why don't you tell us the story behind that?
Yeah, sure. So that book starts off as essentially two stories that get interwoven into a novel. One is the very first trial that I had, federal court trial I had as a young lawyer, where I was appointed by a federal magistrate to represent a prisoner who was in solitary confinement in a case, a civil rights case that he sued the prison over not getting medications for his heart condition. And then it interleaves with the story of a young couple trying to have a family, and then tried to take that journey and the drama and love story that journey is, and interweave it with the surprising things that I found when I tried that case for that prisoner.
Excellent, excellent. That's well, did he win or lose? Did he get his heart medication or not?
So ultimately, this is one of the things that you ask a client, every client as a lawyer when they come through the door, is what does a win look like for you?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes litigation goes on for a long time where the result is not exactly what people would call or a win or a loss.
Mm.
So to flash forward to the jury verdict in that case, um, in that case, we had 10 jurors, and to have a verdict in favor, we would have to get 8 out of 10 as the way it was set up under the civil rules. We ended up getting 2 out of 10 to find for Edwin, and that was the name of the prisoner. Edwin was ecstatic because he had felt that he had just not been heard by the prison system, that he had lost his voice. And to have 2 members of the community buy into his story and believe him was something that he treasured to the end of his life.
No, that I mean that is amazing and a very perilous situation to find oneself in. So that's yeah, that I mean that's an excellent title too, by the way.
Oh,
Um
thanks. I consider myself, like I said, an accidental lawyer. I did not get to being a lawyer by a straight path. I just sort of stumbled into it. It's been a very successful career. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. But yeah, it was circuitous to get here. It was not a straight line.
Yeah, which do you think is harder, law or writing?
So both equally fun and both equally difficult. The law is intellectually stimulating. Being a trial lawyer, you're constantly learning about new subjects. So I've had cases ranging from oil and gas disputes to telecom issues to internal investigations for Fortune 500 companies. So your subject matter is always turning over. So that keeps life pretty fresh. And then it's really just building skills over time as a lawyer, which in a lot of ways is just getting kicked in the teeth over and over and learning when to duck.
You delivered that way too casually. That's yeah, I wanted to get into international law, did my first master's degree to do that, and then it was 2011, so everyone told me, "No, no, no, don't go to law school. It's oversaturated. If you can do anything else, do something else." And I made the tragic unforced error of going into marketing and PR. So,
Very
um,
great, very great professions. You guys, marketing and PR does a lot of wonderful things for people. And that was a period of time after the Great Recession in 2010, 11, and 12 when the lawyer market was very difficult for young lawyers. So I don't know that it was a bad decision.
yeah, I mean, I would have popped out of law school in probably like 2014 and probably been more fine, but I also kind of figured out I wanted to do international law, and I would have had to probably have gone to a school dedicated to that on the East Coast, and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to pay for that at the time and all
All
that sort of thing. So,
all good considerations.
yeah, yeah. So it just kind of things just kind of came together that pathway was not clear. Although every time I look at my bank account and my old ass car, I think I should have gone anyway. Um, but it's good. It's fun. Let's talk about writing process.
Okay.
Are you an outliner? Are you a planner, or does it just come to you and you write it out?
So I've done both. The first book was done perhaps a little bit by outline, but mostly done just by moving forward on the project and dealing with it every day, sort of
Yeah.
sitting down at the computer and writing what came.
Mhm.
The second one I've done a lot more planning and outlining for, trying to get a hold of a process a little bit more tightly so that it's easier to write. It's the practice of law is very busy and time consuming. It consumes a lot of energy. So trying to figure out a process that allows that to be uh, a little bit more simple, that facilitates the writing a little bit more quickly, is something that I continue to try to develop and search for.
No, I'm so glad you mentioned that because most of the people that come on this show don't outline. And in my writing courses on the Cameron Journal Academy, I'm always teaching like outline, outline, outline. My first seminar I went to for my MFA because I decided to, really double down on professions that don't make money, and got a Master's of Finance in Creative Writing, was about outlining. And I was already an outliner, and it changed how I outlined and planned my work. And it really does make it a lot easier when I got to the end of my program and found out that I needed to have my manuscript finished in about 3 weeks. And I only had it half done. The only reason I made that deadline, sort of, I was a week late, was that I already had the rest of the book outlined. The creative part had already been done. So then it was just the sit down and kind of pound it out sort of thing.
Right.
And so it does front loading that creative work makes it a lot easier because if you're trying to get out 1,000 words a day, no matter what, even if you're tired, even if you've been reading, this brief, that brief, been to 3 different courthouses and strangled 2 judges, and maybe several clients that are now in the trunk of your car, you can still get your 1,000 words out because you're not sitting down and your first thought isn't, oh, what should I write? You can just look at the outline, be like, oh, that, okay, 1,000 words done. I'm going to bed. I'm going to work out. Oh, and I got those bodies to deal with. Like
Right.
that. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So no, that I'm so glad you said that because I can't. I can't. I wish I can't encourage people enough to outline. Like, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. There is there's both a lot of freedom in it as well as comfort, knowing that you're going to sit down and deal with one particular aspect of the book at a time, and that you've really kind of thought out where you're going to start that chapter and end that chapter before you even have to sit down. Because the one thing that I find can be very paralyzing is just the blank page,
Mm.
just getting started, and this helps by having consistent momentum. Um, I mean, the writing process doesn't always go every day. I wish I could have the discipline to write every day.
Yeah.
Life just doesn't, the scheduling of life's events and work and other stuff sometimes doesn't make that possible through either energy or time. But the goals are to perfect that process over time and get the system moving so that it's a little bit more machine-like and a little bit less sporadic, if you will.
No, no, I mean, that is the power. That is the power of it. And I think people, kind of forget that life does get in the way. And I have a module in my writing course all about getting started because that's a complaint I hear all the time, either interviewing authors who've already gotten a book out or interviewing people who want to write a book. Um it's a kind of a constant it's a constant problem. And I talk about, that kind of sort of tyranny of the blank page and, writing what you have, even if it's a word cloud, because that you can start an outline from that. You can, if you have ideas, great, write those down because you can start an outline from that. And then once you kind of have that sort of loose structure, or I also have my own system about storyboarding, which kind of takes it to it's outlining plus sort of thing.
Sure.
Then you can really get to work. And then when life gets in the way, it makes it a lot easier to return to a project. Because life, and Margaret Atwood talks about this. She said, I was never had, tons and tons of times and no commitment to write. I was a mother. She's like, and now I have grandchildren. And she's like, I have this interview right now, and I literally have to pick up my grandchildren in 10 minutes. I actually gotta go. Like, I gotta go. Because I have to pick up the grandchildren. So I think, and I think people sometimes get caught up in that idea of having tons and tons of fluid time. And it's like, you don't need that if you have a plan, sort of thing.
Right.
So
Sure. Absolutely.
yeah. So that's very helpful and handy. When it comes to marketing the book and going through that process and photo shoots and one sheets and everything else, what's that been like for you?
So that's been pretty unique. That's something that's not normally something that happens in the practice of law. It's law's marketing is not more dry, but more I just say more clinical, if you will.
Yeah,
So it's been fun to be able to create one sheets and do different things. We've been a couple of years with friends to the Banff World Media Festival in Banff, Canada. That's a great place to go and
beautiful,
made a lot of
beautiful.
nice connections. And it's also been fun just to meet people really around the world, especially through the podcast medium. That's been something that's really a nice outreach. And then standard, just trying to figure out social media marketing or marketing on for books in general is it's a new adventure every day. Just more stuff to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. When does the next book in the Jake series come out?
Should come out near year end.
Oh, nice.
So I think, and, the goal is to start getting one book out a year and then try to accelerate that to one every 9 months and then one every 6 months.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Well, you have one down, and what's that, eight more to go?
One and a half down and eight more to go. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's what are you speaking, one of the questions I sometimes ask, what are you reading right now?
So I go back and forth. I read a lot of other thrillers just to see how authors deal with nuances, right? How do they lay out clues if it's a police procedural? How do they do the tense parts? So I read all over the gamut. And I also end up reading a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of books on finance, a lot of books on marketing, a lot of history books. So I'm constantly reading. I probably read one novel every other day, or two. So I really try to consume as much on the written page as I can.
That's another one. Okay, so I always tell people, and I didn't realize how important this was, I think, until I did my MFA. I'd always read a lot as a kid. I was the kid with his nose in the book and everything. And
Hmm.
between college, grad school, working in nightlife, and a bunch of other things, I wasn't reading as much. And then I did my MFA, and I had to read 42 books in 2 years. And it was so enlightening to return to kind of fiction and reading a lot in volume after having not done it for so long. I actually have a module in my course again about reading, and there's no video. You have to read about it. You have to read the module to learn why you should read. And it is one of those things that's absolutely 110% vital. And I think not enough people spend enough time, you know, reading and sitting with, reading and sitting with themselves and their work, and or reading other stuff to, give them ideas and give them an idea of how to do something. With my first book, I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to lay it out. Was very fortunate. A great book by an Indian woman named Jhumpa Lahiri fell into my lap that was the exact format I needed. And I was kind of like, great, perfect. And I know how to do it, sort of thing. That's the power of reading. So I'm glad you said that. I don't ask people that question all the time, but I'm glad because it is like, yes, like outlining good, reading good. Yes, you're an honorary graduate of the power of story. You've done well. You've done all the work, but you haven't taken the course. That's so it's no, that's a lot of fun. I For legal thrillers, I always loved John Grisham. I used to read a lot of those because my mom would read them and they sit on the shelf, so I just read them because they were there, sort of thing.
Sure.
And I also love a good Baldacci thriller, so I do
Those are
love a good legal
amazing,
thriller.
amazing authors. They do amazing jobs at that particular thing. One of the great things about reading is you kind of can learn what you feel comfortable with or what you like or dislike. I mean, authors all have different kinds of styles. And so you can see how they not only craft the story, but also how they deal with sentences, how they deal, how long the sentences are, how short, how much of it is background, how much of the book is dialogue. And then you can kind of you can pick and choose almost like an Easter egg hunt, the things that you feel most comfortable with and the style that you can implement for yourself the best.
Yes, that is a huge aspect of the great part about you read, and also reading broadly. One of the things I did, and I still am kind of doing it, but I started in grad school, is I love picking up a graphic novel now. I love picking up
Mhm.
illustrated stuff because it's a different type of storytelling, and it's a wonderful way to just kind of read broadly, consume a lot of different things. It's a lot of, it's a lot of fun, and even online stuff, even great, fiction, if you're on a Wattpad, whatever have you, even fan fiction stuff can be, just experimenting with other people's styles, seeing what other people are doing, how other, descriptive words people are using. All this type of thing is incredibly, incredibly helpful.
Yeah,
So
without a doubt.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What do you do for fun besides write?
I'm married and have been for 30 years almost.
Oh
And
my,
I have two
congratulations.
daughters, both that one is graduated and works for a PR firm in Atlanta, Georgia, and the other is in her last semester of nursing school. Both of them went to Clemson, so sometimes we travel back there for a football game, or we find other things to do. Hanging with the family is a great time, and then I do uh, I do enjoy a good television show or movie and watching how they put story together on that, and not picking apart in a bad way, but just seeing how that medium is done and what, if anything, can be translated to the written page.
Yeah, no, no, that's one of the things I do love about like the current thing with like short video is the type of storytelling that's kind of gone on, the sort of
Mhm.
serialized micro episode sort of thing. There's a really great jewelry brand called Alexis Bitar, and they have hired two actresses, and they tell this story about this sort of Upper East Side New York woman in like 5-minute vignettes featuring the jewelry. They never advertise their product, but they're just the actors are wearing it and they're telling the story. And there are people who will never buy their joy. It's very expensive. It's like $3,000 for one thing. They'll never buy the product, but they're absolutely glued to the story. And it's kind of taking the advertising and marketing world by storm because as a branding marketing product, no one knew who Alexis Bitar was. Now everyone knows who they are. Not because they did brilliant advertising, but they told this really fascinating story and everyone's watching like it's television, sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so I love that. I love that aspect and just other experiments that people are doing. Anywhere there's a story being told, I'm kind of there. So so I enjoy seeing other ways people are telling stories. So
100%.
it's
Story
it's
is
good.
everywhere. It's even in, I mean, story is the practice of trial law, is telling stories because your client has a story and you advocate it. So trying to figure out how it works is critical. One of my great friends and a legendary trial lawyer by the name of Rusty Hardin, one of his maxims is that every trial is a morality play. You just have to
Yeah.
figure out who's what character and make them fit.
Narrative is very important on the news side of this show. I always say news is a narrative. That's why they call it a story.
Hmm.
And so I'm very sensitive to narrative in all aspects of life. Because sometimes I'll tell people, I was like, are we arguing about the thing? Or are we arguing about the narrative? Are we arguing about how we're talking about it, or are we arguing about the thing? And usually it's how we're talking about it, not the actual thing.
I
You
agree with
know,
that 100%.
it's what was said and how it was said, not necessarily the actual thing itself. Sort of thing. So, um, no, narrative is very important, and laws, especially in a trial situation, is a lot of narrative crafting and creating a narrative. Um,
100%. I agree with
so
that.
yes, that I was very mindful of that. I was in a production, a small house theater production of 12 Angry Men, and that was a lot of fun and a lot of narrative, and also very hard because it's continuous dialogue. There's that played only stops for the intermission. Otherwise, it's constantly going through. So people really have to know their stuff. But narrative is very, very important, and also how those narratives are taken down, and broken apart. And that whole show is basically taking what seems to be a nice, tidy, tight narrative, and slowly but surely through the course of the show, finding out, no, maybe not so much. When you look at things more closely.
That's true, and that's actually
So
not a bad window. It's dramatic, of course, but I've had the blessing to be able to do some jury studies and watch mock jurors deliberate um, several times. And it is amazing what goes on in the jury room and how people discuss things and what story or part of the narrative they pick up from inside the courtroom, and how they use that to argue amongst themselves to come to a verdict. It's always very interesting uh, exercise in human dynamics to watch that happen.
yes, I this year at something or other publishing, we had a new book out called About Not Losing, and it was about a malpractice trial in the late 90s, early 2000s in Colorado. And the doctor who was the subject, who was the defendant in that trial, had written a book about the whole thing. And one of the great things they did is not only did he get parts of the book from his attorney and the court trial psychologist, who I've met and is lovely, um, all these years later, but he also got a lot of background data on the jurors and got real quotes and interviews from them. They ended up settling at the last minute, so they never
Sure.
deliberated or anything. Because I think the other side saw they were losing and are kind of like, let's find a way out of this. We don't sort of thing. So kind of a last minute Friday night 8 p.m. plea out situation. Um, but it was quite interesting listening to the quotes that they gotten from the jurors at the time, and kind of again the different parts of the narrative that people had picked up on, their own personal reactions to it. A lot of the narrative also, there was at one point where one juror just closed their notebook, and that's when the guy who wrote the book's attorney said, we've got them on our side. Like, no, we've got them on our side now. Like, this is, you know, this is a good thing. And yeah, and all the merging of law and medicine in that book is, I read that book in the course of editing and developing it probably 5 times, And the
Hmm.
marriage of law and medicine, that's it's just like it's watching two prize fighters go up against each other. Two big, great professions, very confident, tend to be type A people, and just running into each other. It was very interesting. And also interesting with narratives and witnesses and what's supposed to be said and creating all of that and countering all of that, which we actually
Yep.
go through in glory. It was sometimes hard to edit it because it's kind of like, oh my God, what to get rid of. So I kind of had to find the main throughput of the narrative, cut away everything else, so we just kind of have this one nice, neat column. Otherwise, readers would get tired and bored. But yeah, and we actually notate so we have the original trial transcript. We have cut it down for your reading pleasure. Law cases are a lot more tedious than what you're about to read. It's
That is
so
true. That's very true. Trial law takes a long time to do.
yeah. I mean,
Trials, a long time a lot of effort.
this case took place. It had two trials over 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the incident happened in 1986. The first trial was in 1988, and they finally found a conclusion in 1993.
Oh my gosh. That is a long,
Yeah.
that is
It
a
was a
long effort.
it was a long time. The first trial was a mistrial. They had to have a second one, and there's all those pre-motions and all this sort of thing and whatnot. And so, yeah, it was if you ever get bored and want to read a legal case that's about not losing, you can buy it on Amazon.
Oh,
Um,
sure, sure.
but it's a very interesting sort of thing. And that was, yeah, so when you talk about that aspect of narrative and how that affects, I immediately think of like, ah, yes, I've lived the literary version of that story, trying to take a law case and make it interesting to read. So
That
um
can be challenging. That can be challenging. I mean, one of the things that goes on with that, especially in trial law, is the amount of human drama because it is somebody's. Once you get to a trial, it's a big deal to both litigants, both people on both sides,
yeah,
especially in malpractice or others. But even in commercial cases, sometimes the amount of money at stake can be enormous. It can be hundreds of thousands, millions, tens, hundreds of millions. And so people have a lot of themselves invested in it. There's a lot of emotion, lots of ups and downs, and the anxiety is just like gasoline on the fire. So part
yeah,
of that is that we're called attorneys and counselors. There is a lot of effort put on the counselor side, especially the closer you get to trial, because you have to realize that your clients are human and they're going through the stresses. And a little bit like an emergency doctor, a lot of times when somebody finally gets to a lawyer, you're finding them on one of their worst days possible because they're so incensed or so broken or so upset that they're finally going to do something in the public sphere in a litigation. So
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of human drama involved in that.
No, and that was certainly true. I mean, this was a case where a mother of four had a procedure done as an accident. They went to the doctor who wrote the book we worked with to fix it. The fix failed, and she basically ended up a vegetable for the rest of her life.
Oh my
Mother of
gosh.
four, small child, all this type of thing. And so obviously they went through and sued everybody, every
Hmm.
hospital, every doctor, anyone, sort of thing. And they hired a nurse lawyers to evaluate the medicine, and it was, I almost wanted to change the title to the standard of care, because that was the real argument, was what occurred the proper standard of care? Did they actually do anything wrong for which they should pay money for? And that, for especially for our author at the time, almost destroyed his marriage.
Yeah.
um and for him, I mean, the emotional scars of that, I didn't even realize till the book went on sale. And I was talking with one of the who was starting his career at the time, who's now long in the tooth, because this book took place 30 years ago, sort of thing. um and all this sort of thing, how much like it totally changed his life, and all the people's lives that it touched, because it took place over such a long period of time and there was so much at stake. I mean, even in the early 90s, I mean, it was a modest amount, but which was huge back then. I mean, it was going to be a case for $2 to $5 million, which is a lot of money now. It was a huge amount of money back then.
Sure.
um and just
Sure.
watching how it all the interpersonal relationships, some of the interesting phone calls I've had with people in the course of doing this book project. So I mean, it's amazing how, yes, the human side of it is absolutely absolutely tremendous. And so, but I imagine in your fiction series, Jake Ties That Bind, you get into some of that, I would hope.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I really appreciate, or try to do, like to do, is I think, and maybe it sounds silly, but fiction can be plot driven, but I really think it's character driven. That especially when you're going to try to put together a series, the thing that's going to make it move forward over time from book to book to book is the characters, people wanting to learn what happens next. So you spend a lot of time trying to figure out how each of the characters in the book arcs. Like there can't be a flat character in a series, really. There might be a bit character here and there, but anybody that's going to be in more than one scene or stay around for a while, they need to have some sort of arc and personal growth or revelation in their life. And so figuring out how that all works with all of the characters over that structure of one book, three trilogies, 9 book series
Yeah.
is part of the creative process for me. And that's one of the things I love the most is developing and trying to make very unique characters.
Yes. That no, that's I mean that character driven thing. That's an area where I struggle. I'm a very plot driven person. That's not what people tend to read, not what tends to sell. Um I'm very much more fascinated. I'm not as fascinated with the people as I'm more fascinated with the story. I'm autistic, can you tell? And so, and so, I sometimes have trouble really developing the people aspect, which is funny because when I was working on About Not Losing, the author was like, I didn't know the story was about a defendant, a lawyer, and a trial psychologist, and you made it about the people and changed the whole thing of the book. And I'm like, well, it helps when it's not written by a neurosurgeon. That really helps a lot. In fact, he had a launch party, and I wasn't able to fly out to Denver to go visit it, but they had me arrive by FaceTime, and I said, "Yeah," I said, "the book's taken a while to get along. It was finished in the '90s, and I was 5 when the trial was finished, and Jay just had to wait for me to grow up, go to college, go to grad school, learn books and publishing, publish 3 books, go get an MFA, so I could finally be ready to do his book." So it was just a little bit of patience required. But yeah, it really is. Yes, the people driven thing is very important because we have to have someone we believe in and we buy into, someone we care about, you know.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that's great about fiction is not only the ability to create a plot but also a world that people can believe in, whether it's fantasy or a small town in Texas, and then to have characters that are actually alive on the pages. That's one of the things that drives me in my writing. Now other people do something different, and I think that's why you have to read incessantly if you want to be a writer, because you're going to pick up the things that you really like. And knowing that the books you're reading are successful means that the things you like, if you incorporate them, you'll be able to have an audience as well. So there's a bit of a safety net in it in reading, but there's also great education in it. And then, like I said, for me, it's great enjoyment because the characters are what matter to me. And so I get to watch how people develop characters or choose not to develop them.
Yeah.
You can learn from both sides of the equation.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You can always tell, and this is even true in life, dynamic people that change over time. And sometimes when characters don't change, sometimes characters not changing is more powerful than them changing because it's like, oh,
Can be.
this person is in the same place we were when we left them, and that probably is not a good thing. Sometimes it can be a good thing, but that's probably not a good thing and can indicate a great deal about them, because they just never, they never sort of, change or move. And you can infer a lot of stuff emotionally from that. You can infer a lot of other things about them from, that stagnancy. So,
Absolutely. The character change and the love of characters, I think, is one of the things that made Ted Lasso so successful as a series, because all of those characters are much different in the third season than they are in the first. The transformation of Jamie from a narcissist and being completely self-centered to where he ends up at the end, or Roy being just hard as a rock in the first part and then ending up being quite lovable by the end. Is I mean, those changes and dynamics over time are something that a lot of people really love, and they're very successful and helpful in storytelling, I think.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we've reached the portion of the show. where we do plugs and we find out where we can keep
Okay.
up with you online, buy the book, and all that type of thing. So let us know where we can keep up with you online.
Okay, great. So easily you can either do www.michaelstockham.com. You can find me at jakefoxthrillers.com. And the books are on sale at Amazon. And they're also available. So they're in hardback, paperback, and in Kindle. So you can read the original one, Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer, or Jake Fox Ties That Blind. And soon you'll be able to read Jake Fox Don't Forsake Me, because it'll be coming out in the near future.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast. It was delightful having you.
It was a blessing to be here, and it was a great conversation. I hope you have a wonderful and wild Wednesday.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.